layoffs that started in 2023 have only picked up in 2024. So what is the cause and how does it affect us? Let's find out. Layoffs in general peaked in May 2023 as the central banks stoked fears of a slowdown with their respective policies. Since then, they were gradually declining until January 2024 when they started picking up again. This is surprising since central bank rate cuts should mean increased hiring because of growth. So why is the opposite happening? Well, companies have cited a variety of reasons, with companies like Unilever, Apple and Vedanta closing planned business expansions, citing various problems, while others like Flipkart and Swiggy simply blamed a restructuring to lay off 10% of their staff. And finally, giants like Google and Microsoft are rebuilding their teams to better suit new business opportunities. 3 reasons, but does any of this affect you? Let's find out. First, companies backing out of intended expansion plans is not an isolated incident. Anil Agarwal's Vedanta had to back out of its foray into semiconductor fabs because of a lack of a technology partner. Unilever's ice cream business was never really profitable, and Apple's foray into cars was a stretch too far from their business anyway. Fortunately, none of these seem to have trickled down to partners, so the salaried class here seems to be safe. As long as you're involved in the core business of your company, it should not affect you. Companies usually only shut down unprofitable or smaller divisions in recessionary scenarios, so unless you work for a startup that is run like Byju's or Paytm, you should be fine. Speaking of recessions, Swiggy and Flipkart's decision looks more menacing. This restructuring is a much more widespread phenomenon. For example, SAP just laid off 8,000 people, Amazon has laid off people across sectors, eBay has reduced its staff by a huge 9%, and it just goes on and on. And we should remember that this is happening when consumer spending has not slowed down, and companies don't usually cut jobs when earnings are high. This might be a hint that the larger companies can see a slowdown coming, as, well, everybody can. This effect also compounds over time, so the longer we stay on high rates, the worse it gets. And this affects us a lot, because if a recession hits, companies are not going to care about who they fire. Among the sectors that have been most affected, retail has seen the highest number of layoffs, with tech and finance following close. So if you work at Zomato, Swiggy, Flipkart, Amazon, Myntra and similar, you might be at risk. We have to consider though that a large part of this also might be because of COVID. Companies hired too many people, too fast, and are now trimming down. So if you see a lot of new faces around the office, or if you are a new face, you might be in trouble. If your company is dependent on new business instead of long-term contracts, you might want to polish up your resume. And finally, if you don't get along with your boss, now might be a good time to make amends, even if you hate their guts. But there is good news as well. Recessionary layoffs usually only last a few months up to a year. As companies recover, they tend to hire again. The real problem is a new reason for firing that we have not dealt with before. Google and Microsoft, some of the world's biggest employers, are cutting jobs for a much more frightening reason. Recently, Google CEO Sundar Pichai said that layoffs were going to increase in order to, quote, drive velocity in some areas. The area he's referring to is artificial intelligence, and jobs within AI have spiked over the last 2 years, with the sector now contributing to 87% of all emerging tech jobs. This basically means that unless you have some form of exposure to AI or machine learning, you're essentially fighting for the 13%. This is perhaps more worrying for us Indians because our institutions have not caught up to global standards in AI and ML. While there are professional courses available, this topic is far too advanced and niche to be able to be covered in a 6-week optional course. If we continue to fall behind in creating capabilities within AI and ML, we will see an outflow of jobs to the developed world from MNC companies. And this sector is one of the largest employers in our country, forming a large chunk of our middle class. So what can you do about it? Well, there are plenty of courses on reputed websites like edX and Coursera from reputed institutions that you can take to develop the skills. You can then complement that with hands-on experience in transformations that are happening in basically every company. The good news is, once you understand ML and AI, its applications are so vast and so fruitful in the long term that as long as your company has the resources to implement it, your newly learned skills will push you up a few notches on the company ladder almost instantaneously. Now, if you're not in tech, I'll be making another video about which sectors will be most affected by AI and if there is something you can do about it. Until then, subscribe. See you next time.